everybody, Jason back again. I've got Fallen Eagles Waterloo 1815 on the table here, and this is the Ugamon scenario 1, which is a learning scenario. Not a lot going on in here, not overly involved, but let me give a rundown of some things first. With the game, you do get one rule book, as I've shown. You also get a number of charts here. They're very generous with their charts. You get a fire table and random special events table. And on the back, you get a melee table with die roll modifiers and melee results explanation. You get 2 of these. You also get a turn track for the game. You will get a unit identification chart. That's what I'm trying to say. Unit factors, as well as nationalities and unit types. On the back is your terrain effects chart. And at first glance, for some of you, including me, this game might seem a little overbearing, but it's not. It's nothing any of this can't handle. I haven't taken these out yet because I haven't used them, but you get a little tiny grouping of playing cards there. 2 maps are included in the game, and the map style is not anything different than what you see on the camera. And your counter sheets. So the counter sheets are, I would say, smallish, but you get 4 of them, and they're going to look like this. Very nice counters. I like the style in which it's done. Again, you get 4 of those. Now 3 of those are going to be units, and then 1 of those is going to be information markers. Nice size maps. Here's the other map. 2 of those. And you get some, I guess you call them, order of battle setup charts for various scenarios. You don't need one for the introductory scenario because it's such a low allotment of units, but they're going to look like this in general. And that will aid greatly in helping to set up and prepare for play. You've got 3 of these front and back. And then you also have, and this game is, I believe, designed primarily for 2 players. Part of the reason I believe that is, you get these. These are order sheets, and you're going to designate at the beginning of the turn what orders your formations have, and those orders can range from a geographical objective to rallying to a defense order, and of course you're going to keep these secret from the other player. If you're playing by yourself, such as I am, the orders are kind of known to you for each side. I guess you could come up with some clever way to game that out such that there's a modicum of fog of war, but I leave that up to you guys. If we go back to the rules here, we'll gloss over those briefly for you. Game scale is 100 men for cavalry and infantry units, and 1 or 2 guns depending on the caliber for artillery. And each hex, if you go from the distance between 2 of them, it represents approximately 200 meters. You've got combat units, you have leaders, nice little glossary here. Your sequence of play consists of an orders phase, which I've kind of glossed over, a first player determination phase, which is just rolling 2 dice 6, the lower die number corresponding to the side determines who goes first. Then your activation phase. And you're going to activate by formation. So on the scenario we have here, we really only have 1 formation for each side in play. So to activate, you would roll against a leader such as this leader here. Roll against his initiative factor. So he has a 7, and you want to roll equal to or less than that to activate. If you don't get to activate. And I have to say, at the first playthrough of this scenario, we might get a cat box usage here. I had a significant number of failed activations, which greatly expedited the play of this scenario, but went back through and forced some activations just to get a sense of and feel of how the game flows. So that's how you would activate, and then you could also activate if somebody is not within command range. So I believe leaders have a 6 hex command range. If somebody is outside of that range, you can do an independent activation, if I remember correctly. Once you assumingly activate a formation, what can you do? Well, then it breaks off into fire and movement. Movement varies according to unit, with cavalry having as much as 8 movement points. It's like we have an artillery unit here with 3 movement points. So there's kind of a varied number of movement points depending on unit type. Then you have stacking, and let's see, each infantry unit size point is worth 1 stacking point, while each artillery or cavalry unit size point is worth 2 stacking points, and a maximum of 30 stacking points can stack in 1 hex. So fairly liberal amount of stacking allowed in hex. Then you'd deal with something called a lead unit. This is important for, among other things, taking fire. So when you take fire, you're going to designate a lead unit if you have a stack to take the brunt of the fire results. You also have leaders which can influence a lead unit if they're stacked with them. Zones of control, yes, you have the old-fashioned, old-school zones of control in here, and there's nothing too earth-shattering by way of how those function. Zone of control does have effect on movement and retreat, so there's that to bear in mind. It goes into your orders, which again I've already briefly explained on your orders display sheet here. You have chits that you will use to designate your orders. Then we get to movement, nothing new there. Fire combat is fairly simple. I would say very simple, actually. You're going to roll 2 dice 6, and then based on whether or not you're infantry or artillery, there is a chart for each that you will use. So again, this would be your infantry chart, your artillery chart, and then your modifiers. And you use your modifier. Now, firepower for each infantry or artillery unit does not work the way you would think it works. It's a little different. Let's see. Let me back that up. So artillery units have a fire factor, and the only way that works into fire is as a modifier. So for instance, for each 10 strike points of artillery firing, you get a -1 on your die roll. That is how firepower works for artillery. And then we have the results, right? So once you run through these modifiers, the lower the better, and you have results such that there is a quality factor check, and the number that is in the middle, let me take this guy here, the number that is in the middle of this counter, which you probably can't see, it's outlined in blue, is the number you want to roll less than or equal to. It's kind of like a morale check, I guess you would say. Every possible result on here is going to involve a quality factor check. And then there's straight step losses. And if you flip a counter over, that designates one step loss with, as you might expect, reduced numerical information on the back. Then we have melee combat, which I've yet to do. You conduct that via odds determination, and you use, again, a separate table, a melee table with quite a number of die roll modifiers. You also have opportunity fire in here, strangely and interestingly enough. And let me find where that is. That is, let's see. Opportunity fire can occur in two separate cases. A, if they are not targeted by a melee attack versus adjacent activated enemy units that have declared melee combat against another friendly hex. Or B, versus adjacent cavalry moving from an enemy zone of control to another enemy zone of control of the same unit. And the fire would take place in the second hex. So that is opportunity fire. That brings us to retreat and advance. There's optional and mandatory retreat. Of course, there's advance after combat. There is routing in here with broken down by initial route move, and then it goes into a route phase. There's cavalry charge, special rules. Cavalry may retreat before combat. It's not uncommon. There's cavalry pursuit, as expected. Then you have your special rules, which include the tactical cards, that little deck I showed you earlier. British Artillery Reserve, French Guard, Infantry Rout, Panic. I've seen this in other games and I kind of like it. When you have the French Imperial Guard, if an infantry unit is routed at any time, all other French stacks within 3 hexes of their starting hex have to pass a quality factor test with a modifier of 3, die roll modifier 3. I like that. Then you have morale. If a formation has lost over 50% of its units, it is considered demoralized. And then special events, let's see, random special events are triggered by specific or natural die roll of 2 or 12. And those consist of, fairly limited, but really deal with a leader killed, wounded, or no effect. You got weather in here, which consists of mud and storm. Fog of war, again, which is going to apply to face-to-face play. And that involves, as you might expect, inspecting enemy stacks and facing, which they tell you that facing is not explicitly simulated in the game, and they believe that the quality factors and die rolls effectively simulate what each regiment and battalion officer is choosing. So it's really kind of baked into the game, but they do offer a more rigid facing mechanic for those who require it. And that's it. That's the game. Maybe I'll run through a quick combat sequence for you. Let us assume, now I've already fired the Allies here have a regular artillery unit and a horse artillery unit, and they were able to get, at least this gentleman down here, Sandham, was able to get a step loss on the lead unit in the stack here, so that worked well. But let's assume, for the sake of this video and for your guys' pleasure, let's assume this is the case. Now, if you want to fire with infantry, you do need to be adjacent. Anything beyond that is only going to deal with artillery, and even then up to 4 hexes, I believe. So if we take this French unit attacking the foot guard unit there, let's see how that would work out. So you go to your fire table. If this was a stack, we would designate a lead unit for the target stack, as there's only one unit in the target hex. He will be the lead unit. Let's go ahead and roll 2 dice. Not a very good roll, because lower is better. That is a 10. We go to our fire table. Anything above 8 is off the chart. So let's just go ahead and assume that this was a 3. How about that? We'll cheat. We rolled a 3. Don't tell anybody that we cheated. So a 3, let's run through our modifiers here. Terrain effect. Now he is in some terrain there. What terrain does that consist of? That is an orchard. And for the fire, that is a +1. That brings us to a 4. This is not opportunity fire. This is not fire versus an artillery unit alone in a target hex. Do we have less than 4 strength points firing? No. I don't believe so. Let me check my math. We have 8 strength points firing, if I understand this correctly. So that is not less than 4, and that modifier does not apply. Light infantry type, lead the unit firing. No, it is not light infantry. So based on that, we have a quality factor check and a 1 step loss. Now, when you have that, you do the quality factor check first. His is a 6. You want to roll less than that, which we did not. And when you fail a quality factor check, what happens? That's a good question. What happens when you fail? Quality factor check. If it fails, let's see, 6, 7, 8. If it fails by 2 or less, which it did, I must retreat 1 hex unless 1 combat unit chooses to lose an additional step. So I'll give you a choice here. And as we already have a step loss, if I was to do that, that would eliminate this unit. So I will retreat 1 hex. But to back up for our quality test, they have if it fails by 2 or less, and then if it fails by more than 2. Now, if it had failed by more than 2, I would actually route. And I immediately moved 3 hexes. So there's that. But now, as I did suffer a 1 step, I would then flip this unit over to reflect that step loss. So that's how combat works, more or less. This introductory scenario, again, is watered down. This is geared towards learning the game. They don't include cards. They don't include cavalry. And what we have here, I should have explained this earlier. We do have Hougoumont Farm, which is being defended by the Allies. That is, in fact, their order, a defense order. And to win this scenario, we need to... We get an automatic victory if we control Hougoumont at the beginning of any turn. And this is only a 3-turn scenario, and they don't really specify or go into detail about what controlling Hougoumont consists of. I would assume this hex proper right here. And then they also say, if no automatic victory has been achieved, the Allied wins at the end of the game unless the French player controls hex 2713, which is this tip of this hill crest here. So you got a couple options. You could play out the historical whack-a-mole with Hougoumont Farm here, or you could just, I guess, head for that hill hex, and that would assumably create problems for the Allies, because assuming they have a defense order, they would have to, I think, go through the motions to change that order and then maneuver such that they are able to reflect a new defensive posture in a new geographical location. So that's that. Initial thoughts of this thing. I don't know that I am able to present too much by way of thoughts because I've only really played a slight sliver of this game. But from what I've learned thus far, again, it is not as intimidating as it might seem on the surface. The counter information and the rules are all presented in a fairly clear and succinct manner. Things seem fairly clean. I haven't come across actually any rules ambiguities, so there's that. Do I recommend the game if you're into Napoleonic stuff? Yes. If you're new to Napoleonic stuff, not necessarily. You might want to find something a little lighter. But that said, I like what I've seen so far, so I'll let you guys go, and I'll talk to you next time.